Hey there, Spacemakers. Welcome back to our podcast about making space for a meaningful life by doing less, not more. I'm Daniel Sih, your host, joined by my space-making partner in crime, Matt Bain. We're exploring the fracturing of our attention and how to reclaim your focus. A special thanks to our sponsor, Bulk Nutrients, for supporting our journey to a more focused and intentional life. They not only provide quality, value-for-money supplements, but also invest in the health and well-being of our communities.
The Spacemakers with Daniel Sih and Matt Bain.
Hi everyone, this is Daniel Sih. Welcome back to The Spacemakers. If you've been following, I'm a productivity trainer and author. I'm with my good friend Matt Bain, the other spacemaker. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Great to be here. Hey, everyone.
Yep, and we are covering in this season the fracturing of our attention, how to regain our focus in a world which is kind of vying for our mind. And today's episode, we're focusing on doing the reps, basically giving attention to what we need to give attention to. The idea that our attention is like a muscle, and if we use it, it grows. If we don't use it, it can be distracted. And so how might you do the reps and focus your mind on things that really matter? How do you build habits in your life to think clearly and to invest in relationships, to have a bit of silence and deep thought? Basically, how do you create habits and reps around the things that align with your bigger why? So that's what we're talking about today. I'm excited about this episode as usual.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, very much so.
So let's remind people where we are in this season. We have been going through a framework to help people think about how attention works and then obviously retrain their attention. So step one of the framework is about defining your greater yes.
I go as far as to say it's like defining / perhaps like discovering your greater yes. So this is working out through a process. So we had a couple of suggested exercises that we ran through, a process that you run through to discern, to discover what I suppose is most important and valuable about your life that will influence or dictate where you then focus and direct your attention. And once you've determined that, it's going to be so much easier to say no to the smaller distractions.
Yeah, if you don't know what your bigger yeses are in your life because you haven't given the time to think about it, well then it's very hard to say no to all the small things, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So that's our first step. The second step is about reducing the distractions, so shifting your digital environments to take away some of that kind of noise.
Yeah, that's it. And we went through some pretty specific suggestions around how to do that, particularly with our phones.
Yeah. And also MS Teams,
Yes.
Looking at emails. So we've looked at the workplace context and removing distractions as a team, and then also reducing it as an individual. And the last one is filling the void.
Filling the void.
So once you've made some space by shaping your digital environments, once you know what you want to achieve with your attention, well, then obviously you need to do something about it. So we're going to talk about this in the next 2 episodes as we round off this season. Essentially, how do you build habits and practices in your life around your greater values, your greater sense of purpose and why, so that you can habituate something and do the reps and rebuild your attention muscles.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so attention is like a muscle. And if we do the reps and if we practice concentrated effort, well, then we get stronger. And obviously, if we fill our mind with, mindless scrolling and short form video, well, then that will also shape our mind in a particular way. So I've always thought about the importance of habits and routine and the value of it. Now, I know that people like James Clear have written some great books and, put the science of habits in front of us, which is great. I'd recommend that book amongst others. But
That's Atomic Habits, isn't it?
Atomic Habits, yeah. And the first time I really started to think through this idea of, what he calls atomic habits, I suppose small, insignificant actions that you do on a repetitive basis that change your life, is when I was reading Stephen Covey's work. I was reading First Things First, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He really is one of the founders of productivity, and I really kind of respect his work. And so this is about 14, 15 years ago. I was a physiotherapy manager at the time, but I'd only just become that. So I'd been a clinical physio for a decade, working in various fields, but basically working with clients, treating people. And then I got a role leading a bunch of different services, so 17 health sites across Tasmania. And it was only a deputy role, and then I moved into a management role, but I was a bit of a pig in mud. I loved the challenge, and I think leadership, and probably leadership more than management, but it works for me. But I also didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I felt very much out of my depth. It was also a super busy time of life because I had a young kid, so one baby. I think we might even had our second on the way. I think I was finishing or building off a house at the time, and I was doing heaps of volunteer work with my church, so I just had heaps on. And I went away on holidays to the place where we always go as a family, which is a Piccaninny on the east coast of Tassie.
Nice.
Beautiful place. I've written about it in my book. And I read this book, and Covey basically proposes a question that is really worth reflecting on. And it was like an aha moment. I'm like, this question is the one I have to be giving my attention to right now. So let me read the question. Well, it's kind of two parts. The first one is, what is one small practical action that you can do on a regular basis that will make a profound difference in your personal life? And the second is basically the same. What is one small practical action you could do on a regular basis that would make a profound difference in your work life? And I reflected on those questions. I wrote in my journal. Piccaninny's got this beautiful beach, so I'd walk for an hour every few days, and I just started to think, if I was to put one thing into my crazy busy life that would help solve the problems and pain points I'm experiencing, what would that be? And so I identified there were two things, one for work and one for life. The pain point for work was that I just didn't know enough, like I was really out of my depth. As a physiotherapist, you learn anatomy and kinesiology, and you learn kind of communication, but you don't learn how to do change management or how to organize yourself. And so I knew I needed to read more. I didn't want to do formal study. I just had to read to get just-in-time learning, to learn about productivity and change management, leadership management, all that kind of stuff. And I'd stopped reading because I was too busy. And for personal life, I basically wanted more time with friends because I'm a tasky person. When I get busy and overwhelmed, I kind of withdraw a bit. And I was like, you taught me this term, the idea of having at least a minimal viable product with friendships so that you can't turn around in 20 years and say, I've neglected my friends and now I'm going to try to be a great mate. So I definitely wasn't maintaining a minimal viable product of just like my good friends. So I thought I just have to catch up with my mates a little bit more regularly in a realistic way. So they were the problems I tried to solve. And so I thought, what simple habits would get me there? And I ended up with two habits. So one, I needed to read for 1 hour, maybe 2 hours a week around productivity, around learning, leadership, pull out some books. And for my personal life, I needed to catch up with friends in a scheduled, regular way. I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 times a year, something like that. So nothing too onerous, but certainly something that was regular. And then I had this great idea of bundling. I didn't know the term back then, but bundling is the idea that if you have a habit you want to implement in different domains of your life, let's say the domain of learning or the domain of relationships or the domain of spirituality or finances, you can bundle a habit if you're smart and actually kill two birds with one stone, like, going for a walk with a friend, therefore you get relationships and you get to exercise. Mm-hmm. So I thought, how do I bundle this into one habit? And I ended up thinking, well, let me start a book club. And so I started we called it like the Geeky Men's Book Club. And basically we met 4 times a year. It was on a Friday night. We'd have whiskey, drink beer, eat food, and talk about one book related to business, management, productivity, leadership, change management, etc. The guys helped me pick books. So we did that together. You were part of that group.
I was part of that, yeah.
You were part of that group all those years ago. And we did it for about, 12, 13 years. And we did it for a long time.
Read a lot of books.
And we read a lot of books, like 4 a year. But if you multiply that by 10, it's 100 books. No, I'm just joking. It was a simple way of both connecting with people I wanted to connect with, in getting to know people I didn't know. So, the guys brought their friends, and so I got to know other people who are in a similar stage of life. They were professionals. They were needing to learn more in different fields, and so I kind of had that natural connection. And because I had to read a book, well, it forced me to start to read. And that accountability led me to enjoy reading. I think my attention started to become more capable of reading again. And so it kick-started both of the habits. And in terms of the outcome, I built a great friendship with a guy called Tim Hines, who we heard from a few episodes ago. And we decided, what if we actually make a business out of this? And we started Email Ninja, which was a training course, and it kind of started to take off. Another guy in the book club said, well, this is so good, this Email Ninja training course, I'll get my guys to do it. And so we ended up getting a big contract, and it was such a big contract we had to leave our paid jobs, our real careers like physiotherapy. And so I ended up starting a business, Spacemakers, again from book club. The guys after a while said, these ideas that you keep talking about, they should be a book. And so I thought I'd write an ebook, and it ended up being Spacemaker, which won a heap of awards and got me a TED Talk. And obviously you and I are here today talking about some of the stuff we started talking about probably 15 years ago in book club.
Yeah.
One simple habit, meet 4 times a year, have a book club and read for like an hour a week. And it killed a whole lot of birds with, one stone.
So efficient.
So efficient. I know. I've never had to do another habit again. That's probably a bigger story than I expected. I never thought that would come out of just one simple habit. I just wanted to solve a problem, which was I didn't know enough for my job and I didn't have any friends. But that's the power of simple, repetitive habits, right?
Yeah. I'm really glad that we had like the backstory episode.
Did I tell it accurately from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that was historically faithful. So small, repetitive. One small repetitive step. That's another way of just saying habit, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Look, and
cool,
I didn't. I mean, of course, I knew the term habit, but I suppose what James Clear has done, with his graphs, that if you do a 1% habit and do it regularly, if you go from doing 1 push-up to 2 push-ups to 3 push-ups, if it actually creates exponential gains over time.
Yeah.
I suppose what Covey's question did was give me that experience without the theory that if you simply find a smart habit that addresses a problem that you have, and even better if you can bundle it so you can get a few domains, attached to the same habit, then maybe 1 or 2 habits can truly transform your life.
Yeah.
And in our case, transform your attention.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to regain our attention and fill the void, having maybe turned off notifications, giving ourselves a bit of space, but if you want to then, build relationships, if that's what your bigger why is, or if you want to, invest more in learning or invest in spirituality, or even, get better at making money, but in a smart way, like whatever your goals are, it has to be habit-based. Otherwise, it generally doesn't work. And so it's that habit which is about doing the reps if you're smart about making small changes to recapture attention.
Just to try to pull all that together, what I hear you saying is that really it's almost like a 2-step process. If I'm interested in regaining my focus again and minimizing digital distractions, being able to fill that void with something that's more meaningful, help discover my greater yes. Step 1, it's a good place to start by asking myself that question: what's one small repetitive thing that I can do that'll provide the greatest payoff?
Definitely. And even broaden that, it's just a good place to start by having deep thought, like taking time out to think about how you want to live intentionally, whether you answer that particular question or a different one. Yeah. But it has to start with some intentional reflection, right?
Yeah, it does.
So that's step 1.
Yeah, step 1. And then step 2 is once I've identified, once I've started to answer that question, then start implementing it regularly.
Yeah. And to try to implement it in a way which isn't change the world, move to the other side of the world.
Start a book club.
Yeah, for me that was small actually. It felt small to meet 4 times a year.
Yeah.
And to read, an hour a week didn't seem overwhelming for me. But whatever it is, to start small in a way that your habit is predictive of the outcome you want to get to, and it's also tangible enough to get started.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so you can start right away. You can tick it off. You can get it done. It's taking you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you do that, well, then you can get to where you want and you can start to recapture your attention by doing the reps.
Yeah, that's good.
So speaking of reps, we were thinking that it'd be a great chance to talk with a friend and sponsor of the show, Jess Crowley, who's the general manager of Bulk Nutrients. I've done some coaching with Jess and she's an amazing leader. She's taken the company from being, really a small startup to more than 100 people with a big influence around Australia. They really are one of the leaders in providing, quality but also affordable protein powders and supplements and vitamins across Australia and beyond. And yet we had a great conversation about how she has been wrestling with deep work and her attention. So look, we thought we'd just give you this small segment where she talks about not to-do lists. She talks about what it means to kind of pay attention and help others pay attention as she's gone from being a small to a large company. And it's just great to hear from Jess as a sponsor of the show, because I know that they really value this message, which is why they've partnered with us, and you can learn a lot from her leadership. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you.
Yeah, and look, it's so good to have you here. I know that when I talked about starting a podcast about the fracturing of our attention and why we can't concentrate, you were excited because, I know Bulk Nutrients supports a lot of different groups in helping the health and well-being of people, not just in Tassie, but also around Australia.
Yeah, that's right. And I think One of the things that's key for us is obviously habit building around training is probably really common in our industry. So a lot of people set really good routines around going to the gym or doing their exercise, or they find it much more successful when they do. But what I've really noticed as our company's grown and we've started to get really big is it's really hard to work around all the other distractions that are coming along with being productive. Now, we work in a really sort of value-driven part of the market, so staying productive and efficient is actually really key to us because, our mission is to deliver supplements that are really cost-effective, and you can only do that if you've got a lot of your systems in place and you continue to be really productive. And I guess as we've grown, it becomes much harder in a lot of ways we started with sort of 5 or 10 people and now we're over 100 to make sure that you're still staying really productive as you grow.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I wanted to have a conversation with you, not just because you're a sponsor, although I very much appreciate the support of bulk nutrients in this podcast, but to hear your thoughts about, how do you actually focus and concentrate yourself as a leader? And also leading others in your team, like you just mentioned. And look, what's worth mentioning is, in the time that you've been heading up bulk nutrients as the general manager, it has grown enormously, hasn't it?
It has. It's much bigger than we ever expected. So, we started out as Ben, our owner, started the business just as a sole trader himself, and we really never expected it to be this big. We knew that, we hoped that it would resonate really well with the customer base, but that we probably underestimated the size of that customer base in Australia and how that would continue to grow over the years. And so when we came into it, probably what's been key for us is a lot of what worked for us when we were small doesn't really work for us now that we're big. And I would also say, as you talk about a lot, the options in terms of what is available across all the different apps and all the different notifications that you can be receiving and all the different ways to communicate across teams, in theory are all really great for improving communication, but actually what we're finding is it ends up with just a huge amount of distraction because we've got Teams, we've got email, we've got live chat on our website. The way that customers want to engage with us is across a whole different, variety of mediums. When we first started, it was literally email. That was it, email and a phone call maybe. But now if customers can contact you across WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and then you've got to be across all that as teams, but then also you've got other work that you want to get done. It is really interesting, I think, how I feel potentially that a lot of these apps developed to increase productivity actually end up just making us quite scattered and distracted.
Yeah, so they all have some type of value. Cal Newport talks about any value apps, meaning that every app or product has some value, but the question is, what's the cost of adding that in terms of your attention and focus and the integration and the distractibility?
Yes.
So you and I have worked both individually in kind of a leadership coaching capacity, and I've been able to come in and have a chat with some of your teams. Before I ask you about your own experiences, I do want to say that I'm always amazed at how good a leader you are. I know that's a very un-Australian thing to say, but you both have this very humble way of going about creating a very successful company. I've seen your teams, and you've got this incredibly tight, helpful, kind of caring culture, but also the systems to protect people and allow you to expand. So you come across very humbly, but a lot of the success and growth has certainly been part of your time together. And so I think we can learn from you. And this is why I wanted you on the show. That's essentially what I'm saying, that we have something to learn about the way in which you lead and the way in which you help others to focus. So maybe let's talk about our coaching briefly. What is it about the message of making space for a greater yes that resonated, and how did you live that out practically?
I think one of the things is, particularly with my sort of, I guess, my innate desire and the way that I like to work. So I'm quite relational and I quite like that sort of engagement with people, but I was starting to identify that perhaps my need for engagement or my desire to do that is actually at times quite distracting for other people. And then also potentially what I needed to get done, I was finding more and more so that with the increasing number of people perhaps in teams and the growth of teams and the complexity of systems as they grow, I was finding I could do less and less of those things that I knew that I really needed to do, but I wasn't able to get to them. And so for me, it was a bit of a balance of coming to that point where you start going, I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed across what I feel like I should be doing or need to be doing for the continued success of the company and what I end up actually doing.
Yeah.
And also knowing and understanding about myself that potentially I'm allowing myself to procrastinate or lean in towards those things that are a bit more fun and engaging and doing less of that work that's perhaps less visible but is more important over time. And so a lot of that sort of strategic deep thinking work, you can't really see it in the short term. And so there's something about getting value from those things where you can see when you pack parcels, if you do 500 parcels a day, you're like, look at that, I did 500 parcels, you know. But if you're doing some, I guess, thinking about your strategy or some deep work that is going to benefit the business in a year or 2 or 3 or longer, you can't sort of sit back and go, look at what I did.
Yeah.
and I was, when I came to you, I was coming to that point of going, I'm starting to just feel really overwhelmed. And I remember when we did in some of our masterclass work, when one of the things was write everything down, get it out of your head and write it down. And myself and one of the other members in the group were like, actually now we feel really overwhelmed, because when you see it written down, it does feel quite overwhelming. But as you rightly pointed out, without writing it down, it's still all sitting in here. So it's still hanging over us. And so it has been a little bit for me, that mindset shift of going, writing it down actually isn't bringing it into being. It's just acknowledging that it's there hanging over me.
Yeah, we're not adding commitments to your
That's
plate,
right.
but what we're doing is we're externalizing them and helping you to come to grips with the reality of what you've committed to, so that you can start to make wise, helpful decisions about what you pay attention to and what you get off your plate.
Yes. And I mean, one of the really key things I remember saying to you was that what you say no to. So to me, that's been really strong too, because actually saying, no, I won't do that, or I acknowledge I can't, or I don't have the time to do it now, and seeing that as a real positive as opposed to seeing it as a letting someone down or should I be able to do this, has actually been great. And I mean, I quite like writing things down. So even though I have that, a lot of those digital systems, I still can't, for me, it's not quite as valuable as having that written down to-do list and also that written down what have I said no to. And that's been really strong for me, because at times, you know, of course, things just continue to get pushed down your list or you don't end up doing them. But now I'm getting better at going, well, if I've pushed that down a few times, is it actually something that should be on the no?
Yeah.
And
so there's your not
away.
to-do list or your not to do now list, so that you're separating what really matters from what doesn't, which is part of managing your attention.
Yeah. And I think it's been funny because as we were small, I think taking every opportunity that came up was really important for the company. You know, it's how we got in front of people. It's how we took chances to get where we are. But again, it's that thing where you get to that tipping point and it's no longer working for you anymore, because the fact if we say yes to everything, we just do 100 things at 1%, rather than going, let's do 10. And that's been a bit of a shift culturally for us, because the real positive about having a strong team and that it's been there for a long time is that we know each other really well, we know the company really well. The flip side is perhaps we're still working on models that we developed 10 years ago and we haven't really sort of updated them based on the fact that now we're not 10 people in a small shed. And for some of us, it's a really easy switch over, and for some of us, it's not.
I love that idea that, you know, when an organisation doubles in size, you have to radically transform everything you do. And so on the one hand, you went on a journey to think, okay, I have strengths in relationships. You're great at relationships. You're great at connecting. You're great at having an idea and giving stuff a go. But with the bigger size of your company, you needed to put in some rigor around focus, concentration, deep work, maybe systems that allow others to follow that lead. And then we've done some work with your team to help them get their inbox to zero, to start thinking about when do you use Teams, when do you turn off notifications, what might your communication channels be like. So I suppose creating some systems in your leadership teams so that everyone can have a sense of concentration while they're doing all the other distracting communications.
And we're quite good at keeping each other accountable in a really sort of positive, fun way too. So, you know, there's quite a lot of, you know, you be responding to me now, or like, you know, we can, you know, in a nice way. We use a lot of memes and gifs and things in our organisation, but be like, you're not allowed to be talking to me at the moment, you know, or you're supposed to be in that blocked out time. Why are you calling me now?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Which we can hold each other really accountable in still a really positive way.
In a positive way. Yeah. I love it. And I've seen that. There's a very fun, loving culture within Bulk Nutrients, which actually goes with the playful brand that you have. So maybe to finish, I'd love you to tell me a bit about Bulk Nutrients, because we talk about attention being like a muscle, and the more we practice and train our attention, the more we grow. And I know that's why you sponsored the show, because you actually care about people's concentration and their health as a whole. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we do is we manufacture sports and nutritional supplements, and our mission is to make quality supplements more affordable. So we bring in all the ingredients ourselves, we develop the products, we blend them, we package them, and we ship them out direct to customer in Australia and New Zealand. And we're really proud of that whole supply chain involvement. So we don't sell anyone else's products. We develop them specifically for our customer base, and we look after everything from raw goods to delivering them to the customer. When we started, Ben very much saw a niche in the market, which was about pricing. So it was very much around, why are we paying so much more for these products in Australia than we are to bring them in even from overseas? But obviously, as we've developed, it's become, it's bigger than the sum of its parts now. So not only do we care about providing those supplements and how we do that, but, quality is really important to us. But also, I think philosophically, it's just quality of life in general. So obviously, if you can build some exercise and that looks different for everyone into your life, in general, you're going to feel a bit better. The exercise is really important for mental health as well as physical health, healthy ageing, but also about, being able to live the best version of your life. And so for us, I think part of that is living in a really distracted world with a huge amount of stuff going on all the time, which often makes us feel overwhelmed. So if we can sort of, support that in the way that we work, that hopefully flows on then to the way that our staff can live their life outside of work. And we want to reflect that, in the way that we work, but we can still be a really efficient, productive company by doing that. It doesn't require you to do extra time. If anything, what can we cut out to make your time more effective when you're doing it?
No, that's perfect. Look, and I use bulk nutrients. You probably can't tell, but but I love your products. I love the brand. I love the culture that you've created, and I love that you contribute to the broader community in a really generous way, including things like this podcast. And I've seen you make space in your life by being intentional in how you shape your time and manage your distractions. I've seen you lead your teams and your company to do the same, and obviously I've seen you do it in your home life. So, you're an inspiration to me as well. And I'm so grateful for having you on the show, and thank you again for sponsoring our show.
No worries. Thanks.
That was a good interview, wasn't it, Matt?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I particularly enjoyed her point that she had to adjust her kind of default natural style of working with people, highly interpersonal, highly relational. As the company grew and the organisation grew, she actually realised that could start to impair and detract from the quality of work and the attention that her staff were paying. And so she had to actively acknowledge that and then start to work on it and change it, do more deep work and that kind of stuff. That was really good insight.
Yeah, it's good. And one of the things I know about bulk nutrients and the way Jess leads is she really cares about maintaining the sense of family and culture that almost a startup has as the company just grows and grows and grows, and she's wrestling with that. But I really like that wrestle. I think it's the wrestle of a caring, thoughtful CEO, which is great.
Yeah.
Hey, I should have mentioned that Bulk Nutrients have actually sponsored the show, but also given a great coupon code. So if you want to purchase some of their fantastic products, you can go to bulknutrients.com.au. You get a 5% discount on any order over $45. Just put in the coupon code Spacemakers. So thanks again for Bulk Nutrients sponsoring us.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, let's move on. Matt, let's move to the next conversation around behaviour change, because it's one thing to say, okay, I know what I want to change. I even know the habit that might help me get there in order to recapture the kind of life I want to live. But changing your behaviour is tough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to change habits. And you've got particular experience working with people in behaviour change. So maybe tell us a bit about your career experience in that way, and what can we learn if you're struggling to make these shifts?
Yeah, sure. So quite a long time ago, I was a social worker. And I worked in a range of different backgrounds and settings, but primarily I worked in a correctional setting. So I worked in prison, both here and overseas for a bit, and also in the alcohol and drug sector. So I worked with a lot of people around changing their behaviour. For starters, I want to say again, that was a long time ago. So what are we talking about? It may not be exactly current.
Yeah, but you did it for over a decade.
I did it for over a decade, yeah.
And you worked with a lot of different clients in group settings, in some tough situations, and saw some good outcomes.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
So people haven't changed.
And also, of course, a lot of the time, the people that I was working with had full-blown chemical dependency. So when we're talking about addiction, again, full-blown chemical addictions, And whereas, as you and I have already discussed, what we're talking about when it comes to getting too drawn into the digital distractions, you could probably term as a moderate behavioural kind of addiction.
So it's kind of low grade, kind of constantly there. Not quite enough to ruin your life in a hurry, but enough to actually damage it over a long period of time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I wouldn't want to say it's exactly the same thing as, smoking.
Definitely.
Smoking. So with those two qualifiers, I thought about some of the parallels, I think, that you can draw between people, again, who are in that kind of situation, trying to make those fairly serious changes, and the changes that we're advocating and talking about as well. Again, trying to identify a bigger why that you say yes to, which will come at the expense of these digital distractions. So for starters, most importantly, the people who I worked with, they always had a plan. Like I think you've already mentioned, you always need to have a plan when it comes to changing your behaviour, because the pull of the default will always be strong. Well, not always, but initially it'll be very, very strong. So the allure of just kind of going back to what you've known, even if it wasn't helpful, even if it was kind of counterproductive, even if you didn't like it, unless you've got a plan to articulate and direct a way out from that form of behaviour, it's just so easy to kind of go back to the default, stick with what you know.
If you go back to that smoking example, and I know you worked with people with much more severe addictions than smoking as well in terms of chemical addictions, but to get to a plan, you need to be moving beyond, hey, wouldn't it be good if I stopped smoking? To actually experiencing like enough motivation and internal drive to change that you're willing to actually say, okay, now I'm actually going to come up with a specific goal and a way of doing it, right? So
that's right. That's
going beyond just ideas to
intentions.
Intentions.
That's right. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you've got to expect some resistance. So you would have found this too.
I tried to start a book club. You should have seen the resistance. What? You want to read books like that?
That sounds like a small, incremental, easily repeatable change to study a book club. So I was like thinking more about your guitar playing example, right? So you're going to encounter some resistance, like literally the pain that you experience in your fingertips after not playing for a while and not having those calluses build up. That's like a form of resistance. Again, you'll be going against ingrained, perhaps, habits, ingrained ways of thinking, ingrained ways of just habitual behaving. So you can always expect some resistance, I think, when it comes to making some decent behavioural change. So in like going back to digital distractions, again, it's just so easy if I'm sitting around and maybe I'm feeling bored, it's going to be easy for me to slip the hand in the pocket, pull out the phone and just start scrolling. So once I feel that, if I'm trying to change that, I can expect I'm going to have to resist that urge.
So there'll be some pain, essentially, and some hurt, and don't expect it not to be that. You're going to have to work through that.
That's right. You're going to have to work through it.
I like the guitar analogy because it is true. It hurts a bit and you're limited with how much you can do physically because your fingers can't do it. And eventually you get the calluses and you don't notice it at all. So that makes sense, particularly when we've talked about neuroplasticity and digital overuse. That if you're relying on dopamine just to get through the day, if you're constantly reaching for your phone just to get that next hit, the electrocution thing we talked about, well then, it's going to take a little bit of pain and resistance to shift your habits.
Yeah, that's right. So that naturally brings us to the third thing, which is having a why and going back to your why. So why do I want to persevere through this resistance? Why do I want to stick to my plan and not go back to the default? So this goes back to the conversations we've had about a greater yes. And again, actually going as far as articulating that, documenting that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's interesting that you put this third because I think about Cal Newport and, others like David Allen's even, that you can start with, let's say, Big Stephen Covey, find your big why, what's your greater yes, and then kind of work backwards. But someone like Cal Newport says actually he would start with habit change. So pick one habit, start to change it and let your greater why emerge once you start to get the benefits. Similar to, let's say, David Allen, who would say if the alligators are snapping at your heels, deal with the alligators. And then as you get the space, you can start to think about your greater why. So it's interesting that you put it in that order. You have to actually start with some action. And as you create action and start moving, you'll get more ability to then think about why you're doing it. And it kind of plays off the habit.
Yeah, that's it. So we've talked about making space for that, like actually taking the time out in your calendar or diary, your schedule, to start asking questions that'll help articulate that why, haven't we yet?
But if you're totally smashed on your addiction, you don't have the space to do that. So start by unplugging from the technologies and then start by putting into some practice, the plan that you want to do, and then over time your greater why will also grow.
Yeah, and again, like saw that all the time when I was doing social work because inevitably, like we all do, you find like will you encounter some moment of weakness where you're wavering?
Yep.
And it's very, and the choice before you is pretty clear. I can go back, I can revert back to doing this thing that I don't want to do, or I can try to maintain my change.
Yep.
And again, often the thing that we've done, again, particularly when it comes to digital distractions, hyper palatable, easy, just always accessible. So you need to have the greater why, the yes, really close at hand, in the forefront of your brain to be able to reach and provide that little extra shot of motivation.
Yeah, really, when I cancelled book club, I was watching West Wing, all right, and reruns. All right,
so great away, yeah. Now, here's a good one, and again, this came up all the time in my former line of work, and there's a whole lot of theory and research to back up this idea, and that is classic behaviours like alcohol and drug abuse, for example, or super controlling, even like abusive behaviour. These are all what you can call maladaptive coping mechanisms or suboptimal coping mechanisms, in the sense that they are ways, they're means to try to achieve a credible and understandable end. They're just really bad ways or means to go about trying to achieve that end. So, for example, it's easy to get stuck into a really unhelpful pattern of, say, drinking too much if you've got a whole lot of issues in your life that you're trying to avoid. So the need there is to try to somehow work through those issues. The maladaptive coping mechanism is just to kind of drink until you forget about it.
Yep.
So it's like
there's a reason. You're saying there's a reason every habit develops. There's a reason we reach for a phone. There's a reason we scroll social media incessantly, even though it bores us and we wish we hadn't done it.
That's it.
So you want to think about that reason. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, yeah, exactly. So you want to think about that reason and then identify a healthy, productive way, usually, again, a habit, of going about and meeting that same need.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It makes sense. And usually you can kind of take all those particular needs and they're going to end up in one of two camps, right? It's going to be avoiding pain over here, so trying to turn down like the pain and suffering, or it's going to be trying to turn up the pleasure and satisfaction.
Charles Duhigg writes a lot on this in his book, The Power of Habit. He talks about how you might replace the cookie habit with, like talking with someone and being social, which is why you get the cookie in the first place at lunchtime. So again, there are other great resources beyond us that you can check out.
That's right. Again, I'll bring you back to digital distractions. Often I think if your experience, if most people's experience is like mine, scrolling, binge watching TV, all this stuff is usually about, at heart, I think it's about avoiding something. It's about avoiding the work that I'm supposed to do. It's avoiding the hard conversation I'm supposed to have, or it's maybe I'm avoiding fostering and investing in a relationship that I'm supposed to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And even, we talked about that research where people would rather electrocute themselves than actually have silence.
Yes.
We're often avoiding just thinking about who we are and why we're here and what we need to do. Some of those existential questions pop up if you take away some of the stimulation, right? But those questions are necessary to live an intentional life rather than just sleepwalk through it. So there's lots of different things you avoid and run from.
That's it. And then lastly, and again, our experience is borne out time and time again back when I was social working. Every time the clients who I was working with put together a plan to make it really thorough and comprehensive, it always involved other people. Trusted people who you could rely on to have your best interests at heart, who wanted you to use the cliche, to be the best version of yourself, people who you could be transparent with, and usually people who wanted to form, or not form even, but already had those habits down pat that you were trying to build, who were already exhibiting those behaviours regularly that you were hoping to start exhibiting. Yeah, Does that make sense? So you want people who are going to consolidate and reinforce the path that you're going to go down.
Yeah. As I've got a friend who literally left the state to try to get out of cocaine addiction, and he found himself in Tassie without people who are addicted to cocaine. That was actually the game changer for getting past the rehab stage into a normal life for him.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So put this plan together, take this approach with other people who are going to be on the same page. And usually, as you know, with the people comes the environment. So it'll be those environmental factors that'll also make the change that you want to take easier or not.
Okay.
For example, if you go, if you're hanging out with people, maybe over dinner, if everyone starts pulling out the device and looking at it, it's going to be easier for me to. If there's some kind of even unspoken agreement, all of us are here to have a good time. None of us are going to pull out a phone unless something really urgent comes through. Then again, it's going to make it easy for me to maintain that same behaviour.
Right. And we're going to talk about community in our final episode and the importance of community. So maybe we just quickly summarise. So if people want to make these changes, particularly in the area of making space and focusing on things that matter outside of the low quality digital activity realm. So they need a plan. They're going to expect resistance, so know it's going to be a bit painful. You have to think about your why, so what's your deeper motivation, but you also have to think about what is the need that this behaviour, this maladaptive coping mechanism I think you used, what's the need that this is addressing, and then how might I address it in a different way, which is partly those kind of questions around what new habits might we want to build. And then finally, who can help you? Who can you do this with? Because it's going to be very hard to do it by yourself.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Yeah, that's good. And again, I don't think that we can say enough or stress enough to make these changes for the better. Long term, you're going to feel better and more fulfilled by it. But in the short term, it's going to be a little bit harder than just kind of sticking to whatever it is that you were doing. You've never been a smoker, have you?
No.
Okay, so
I can try if you want.
It's never too late. So look, I'm an ex-smoker, and I tell you, smoking made me feel good. It released those chemicals, the dopamines, that it felt good, and it was easy. It was easy. It wasn't until I started running that was a lot harder than smoking initially. So running was a lot harder initially than smoking. I started running because I knew I couldn't be a runner and a smoker at the same time. So one cancelled out the other. But the point is the running path was a lot harder. There was more initial resistance compared to just lighting up a cigarette. And eventually, after running enough, I started feeling good. I started feeling better than I did when I was smoking.
Interesting.
It makes sense?
Yeah, and that fits all those kind of steps that you've described. And it fits where we're heading next, which is how do we actually take a low-grade digital addiction, let's say, rather than a full-blown chemical addiction? Because that's the good news. We're not talking about full-blown chemical addiction. We're talking about, for most of us, there is internet addiction, but for most of us, we're just wasting our life and we're filling our brain with stuff that's making us distracted, and it's drawing us away from the better life we want to live.
That's it.
So we always finish each episode with a practical activity. We're getting to the meaty end of this. And the activity is simply to think about how you might fill the void by doing the reps with a repetitive activity. So I want you to literally think of that Stephen Covey question. What is one small practical action that you can do on a repetitive basis that will make a tangible, significant difference in your personal or work life? Just pick one of them. Pick one domain and answer that question by reflecting on it and then putting in a plan into practice.
Yeah.
So you and I have talked about, if people are going to think about that question, it's worth thinking about various domains in their life where the research says this is where you want to fill the void with these particular things to increase our focus, attention, happiness, quality of life. So things like improving your physical health. So you mentioned running. I think to fill the void with some type of physical activity is a winner. As a physiotherapist, not only am I promoting physical activity for your physical health, but actually the research says that there's probably even more benefits on your mental health and your cognitive abilities by exercising, not just the physical benefits. So that's definitely bundling just there. So physical health, another domain is learning and mental growth. So reading, learning, increasing your thought life. Practice reading books again is a big one that I would really advocate for as a keystone habit. Relationship building. So we've talked a lot about that. Do you want to have a date night with your spouse, spend more time with your kids, run a book club with your mates? Hobbies and leisure. We've talked about high quality leisure activity. If I keep playing guitar, I might actually be able to play 3 songs one day. And then spiritual growth, that involves silence, contemplation, journaling, meditation, prayer, addressing the inner life, which then flows out into your outer life. So these 6 domains, physical health, learning, relationship building, hobbies and leisure, and spiritual growth, these are good areas for you to invest your habits in to fill the void and the space made by removing notifications, mindless scrolling, and time on social media.
That's great. So what I like about those 6 is that there's something that everyone will be able to dive into in amongst those 6. And again, just to stress what you were saying before, we're only advocating a small change, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, one small change. But remember, you can also bundle it, right? So it might be, I really want to invest in thinking more deeply. So I'll read, but I'll talk about the books with, a friend. Or I want to exercise more, but I want to be more social. So let's join a club or go to CrossFit. Do you know what I mean? So you can bundle and then pull in a few domains. And for example, if you're doing that, you're also increasing your cognitive ability because you're getting fit. So it's 3 domains in one.
Yeah.
Very productive.
Yeah, very efficient.
Very efficient.
Very efficient.
If you could find a way of doing all 6 domains in one, let me know, and we'll advertise it in the next show. But so do that. once you've worked out what you want to do, give it a go. Just do one small activity this week and start to put it into practice. I know that's a lot, but we're near the end of the season, and we really want you to start to make progress so that you finish this season having journeyed with us and actually experienced some type of tangible, meaningful benefit. And if it's a habit, well, that benefit will play out well beyond this episode.
That's it.
So we like to lead with example.
We try.
We try. We've also given some pre-thought about this. What would you like to do?
Yeah, so here's what I like to do. I'm trying to place this in that list of the big 6 that we mentioned, and I think it probably goes into learning and mental growth. I want to get really rigorous and disciplined with my time blocking on a daily basis. That is every day, every work day at least. I want to start the day. I want to start my work day by opening up my big old school hardbound A4 page to a day calendar or diary. And I want to block out in 30-minute increments how I'm going to spend all my time 9 to 5.
Okay, so Count Newport style, time block planning where you're actually allocating tasks to every part of the day.
Yes.
And then moving that as things change.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, because I need
one small habit.
Yeah. So I know it's not starting a book club with your mates, but still. Yeah, because that's going to help really direct and focus my attention on what's important. If I don't have that, if I don't have like those kind of identified hard and fast boundaries, my default can just be to fritter away time.
Okay.
And often that involves the digital distraction stuff.
Yeah, cool. But I can see how that one habit would unlock a whole lot of benefits in a whole lot of areas of life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my small, simple thing is I'm going to solve climate change next week. I've been thinking about the activities we've been doing this whole time. And the one that was the kicker for me was give attention to 3 people who really matter in your life and write their names down and actually focus on people. I do get so task-focused, so goal-focused, and honestly so focused on myself and what I want to achieve that I'm a bit blind sometimes to the people I care about most. And so I want to get better as a habit of really giving attention to people I care about. And I was thinking about it on a walk. I'm a bit like, because I'm actually a very focused person. That's one of my strengths. I get hyper-focused.
No.
No, right? But it's a bit like those kind of bowling alleys, when you put up the bumper bars for the kids who can't actually bowl and you can't miss like the Skittles. It's a bit like when I'm focusing on a goal or a project or a task, it's like me with one lane, and I find it very hard to shift and see all the other lanes that are around me, particularly people in my life. So I want to get better at probably writing in my diary who are the people I want to give attention to, just making sure that I'm giving more of my cognitive attention to people and thinking about them, their issues, their struggles, how I can help or love people in my life. That might not sound hard, but it's actually quite hard for me. So there's a bit of pain in that.
Yeah.
In terms of learning to reshift how I think.
Yeah.
And give attention to who I really care about. So that's what I want to work on.
So you'd be redirecting focus towards important people in your life. Yeah, that's a worthwhile goal there.
So we always add a little bit of space in the episode to think about what you've heard. In this situation, I just really want you to pause and reflect on when might you make time this week to think about this question and then obviously put something into practice. So have a moment of silence or space to think about when you'll actually take the time to think deeply about this. So hopefully you came up with an action trigger. If you need help putting into practice the habits that you come up with, we have this great tool. We've got this cool little habit tracker that you could download. If you go to spacemakers.au/habit, there are 2 trackers. Basically, a habit tracker is where you can either print off a weekly tracker where you can tick off every day that you've actually done this small habit. So for me, I've actually thought about and given attention to people in my life. I tick that off every day. Or there's an annual tracker where if you have a weekly habit, like I want to exercise twice a week, you can tick it off for 52 weeks. So if you're interested, download it from spacemakers.au/habit and start doing the reps.
That's it.
So Matt, that's it. One show left.
One show.
Thank you to all our listeners who have been following this series this far. Next week, we're wrapping up. We're going to talk about community. We're going to talk about why we need a village to kind of overcome our crazy, distracted lives and, maybe celebrate what we've learned throughout this season 1.
Yeah.
Cool. Until next time.
Make space.
The Spacemakers with Daniel Sih and Matt Bain.
A shout out to our sponsor, Bulk Nutrients, the superheroes of the supplement world, helping us make space for gains, not pains. And yes, that's what happens when I rely on ChatGPT to write my pithy one-liners. You can enjoy a 5% discount on protein powders and health supplements at bulknutrients.com.au. Just enter the coupon code SPACEMAKERS for a discount on orders over $45.
If you enjoyed this podcast, we would love you to follow us and leave a positive review and help others make space by sharing this episode with a friend or subscribe to our blog post at spacemakers.au. Until next time, make space.